And we're live. So, Jack, thanks for taking a little time to answer some questions about the industry. And I could introduce you, but I'd probably butcher that job. So, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just starting with an introduction.
Yeah, so my name's Jack Pitts. I graduated from Ranken in May of 2018. I came into it with some prior experience. I used to work for Anheuser-Busch selling beer. Also have a bachelor's degree in management, and then decided I wanted to learn how to write code. So I thought the best way to do that was to go to Ranken. Spent some time with Mr. Gudmestad here, learning code. Then I started working for a small software company called Engage Software, mostly making .NET Nuke websites. And then I started working for Daugherty Business Solutions, which is a tech consulting firm. I've worked for a few different clients since I've been there. I've worked with Anheuser-Busch, MasterCard, and now I'm finishing up my time with Edward Jones. And I've worked in C# and doing test automation through Java, Serenity, Selenium, Cucumber, a few different things.
So we're in
Yeah.
we're in a C# class right now.
Awesome.
So, what was your experience like going from the student learning C# into the real world learning? Writing C# applications.
I mean, it's a little bit intimidating going to a company for the first time, but the thing I've learned about this industry specifically is that you'll usually find multiple people, whatever company you end up at, that are going to be willing to help you learn. So I went in, my first engagement with Daugherty was to build a C# application from the ground up, and it was just me, which was terrifying.
Wow.
But then luckily they brought in a senior level architect who really helped me a lot. So I was able to learn a lot. We built an application for the client that worked well enough at the time. They've improved upon it since. So I would say just be ready to keep learning. Like, you're definitely not finished learning when you leave Ranken. You're going to keep learning. Every employer is going to expect that you have to keep learning. There's a reason in the industry we have entry-level engineers, mid-level, senior-level architects. No one's going to expect you to come into the job knowing everything, knowing how to do everything. They're fully going to expect you to ask a bunch of questions and need help.
Yeah. So now you've been out since, you said you graduated in 18, so you've been out for roughly 4 years. And
Yeah,
how often do you come across things that you've never seen before, never touched before?
every day.
Yeah.
I would say maybe it's a little bit less than that now, but at least every week. I always tell people, like, I'm training some people now in test automation, and I always tell everyone Google's your friend. There's so much out there. There's so many different languages. I feel like there's new ones like at least once a week, if not, there's a lot of new languages. So there's always something new to learn. So you're always going to be coming across something that you don't understand. And even the languages that have been around forever, C#, Java, JavaScript, they're constantly getting updated. So
Yeah.
I feel like there's always something that I don't quite know what to do, but you figure it out.
So you mentioned before we hit record here that you're working from home. Is that like a permanent assignment, or are you going to end up back in the office someday, or do you know?
Um, with my company, I don't have to go back into the office.
Okay.
It seems like most employers are embracing the full remote work from home
Yeah.
lifestyle. We've seen some of our clients try to do like a hybrid model where they'll have people come into the office a couple days a week,
Yeah.
work from home the other times. I've only heard of one company that wants to go back into the office full time, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're going to realize it'll be real hard to do that.
Yeah. So you mentioned when you're introducing yourself, at one point you were working at Anheuser-Busch, you said selling beer.
Yeah.
And then you went to Rankin, and then you went back to write applications for Anheuser-Busch. So what is that like going full circle? What was that like for you?
It was, yeah. So I went into Daugherty my first day, not really knowing what I was going to do. And they're like, hey, you're going back to Anheuser-Busch. And I was like, all right, okay. It was a little weird going back in an entirely different capacity. But I mean, I got to work with other Daugherty employees. So I felt like I was still a part of Daugherty as a company. And because it was such a different thing, sales and IT are vastly different things.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, were
so
there people that you knew from back then that you would see from time to time, or you pretty much wouldn't even cross paths with them?
There was one person who I had worked with before who I crossed paths with. It was
Okay,
kind of funny running into him, but
nice.
uh,
Very cool. Very cool. So, what is your current job title?
I am so Daugherty's a little bit different, although there are more and more tech consulting firms. So I'm a consultant software engineer too. It's like a mid-level software engineer.
Consultant software engineer two. Cool, man. So, did you start as a software engineer one, and then you got the promotion, or?
Yeah, so at my first company, I was a junior developer. Then I came to Doherty and was a software engineer one. So that's what they title all their entry level software engineers,
Yep.
an associate consultant. And then, yeah, about a year ago, I guess, I was promoted as software engineer two.
So, what helped you get in line for that promotion, or what did you do to rise the ladder or go up on the ladder a little bit?
um, I just worked hard every day. And I also networked with my peers and management at Doherty. When I say management, I don't mean like real high levels. I just mean like my manager and the line of service is what we call our different departments at Doherty. So those managers just got to know them. And I had one that sort of advocated for me. But really, as long as if you do your job and you work hard and you are constantly trying to learn, or at least showing that you're trying to learn, then that goes a long way. I think, at least in distinguishing between like an entry level and a mid level software engineer
Nice, nice.
or developer or whatever you want to call it.
So you mentioned this. I'm just going to have you rehash this. What languages have you used? I know you mentioned it, but I just want you to go through them one more time.
So I started out, so at Anheuser, well, okay, so Engage Software was .NET Nuke, so that's all .NET stuff. We did a little bit of JavaScript, uh, vanilla JavaScript, but not too much of that. Then when I was with Anheuser-Busch, it was .NET again. There was a little bit of database stuff, but we had database architects working on that project, so I didn't have to do too much of it. MasterCard, unfortunately, was a lot of support work, but it was mostly Java code that we looked at. And then at Engage, or not Engage, at Edward Jones, I've been doing test automation. So test automation you can do in any language. At Edward Jones, they use Java as the base, and then we use Serenity, Selenium on top of that, as well as Cucumber. There's some Spring Boot in there. And then at my next client, it looks like I might be working with React and Spring Boot, so I've been doing some training on React.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I know that's just, if you're wondering, some of the changes we've had to our curriculum within the last year, we've been bringing in more and more React. So,
Okay, smart.
cool, cool. So, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. What's been your most favorite, or do you have like a cool software project or your favorite software project that you've worked on?
I think the one I worked on at Anheuser-Busch, excuse me, where I got to build an application from the ground up. That was pretty cool. I got to learn a lot, and I actually got to build something new. I will say, whatever you end up doing after you leave Ranken, most companies, not all, but most companies, especially the larger ones, aren't necessarily going to be building new applications. It'll be a lot of maintenance or upgrading. So you get to build some new functionality, but a lot of it is, fixing bugs or tweaking things. But at Anheuser-Busch, like I said, I got to build a new application, and we had to store data, so there was a little bit of database interaction going on there. That was probably my favorite, just getting to build something brand new.
And what did that application do?
So it was a communication tool. So at the brewery, they've got packaging lines. So when all the beers finish brewing, it goes over to the packaging plant, and then it's put into bottles, cans, kegs. And they have people working on the lines 24/7. And then they have managers for each of those lines, sort of laying out the plan, helping troubleshoot things as they come up, helping with the schedule, because obviously you're not only packaging one beer. At St. Louis, at the St. Louis brewery, they make, I don't know, 30 plus different beers there, so it's constantly changing. So it was the line plan application is what we called it. So it was a way for managers to be able to put notes in front of their employees without having to actually go and meet with them, physically meet with them. They're able to, have their meeting with them in the morning, and then as the day goes on, or they can put their plans out there, and then the employees were able to pull it up, and then they were able to make notes and save them so that the next shift coming in would see like, hey, this is what we did. These are the problems we had. Here's what we did to fix them.
Okay, neat.
Just to sort of keep the line of communication going.
Nice. And to your knowledge, do they still use that software?
I think so. So my brother Andrew worked at Anheuser-Busch for a while.
Okay.
He left about a year ago, but he and I would talk about that application because they were using it a couple years after I had finished making it.
Yeah.
He liked it, so I think it was a good application.
Cool. It's always kind of interesting to me to think about, the software that you've worked on that had a lot of users. And so do you know if you've worked on any software along the way that had some high volume, high traffic?
Yeah, I mean, shoot, we work with a lot of large clients. So the application I'm working on now, I didn't do any actual development work on the application itself. It was all testing the application. That's used by Edward Jones employees all over the country to help people like plan their finances, essentially. So that got
thousands of users, kind of thing.
For sure, thousands. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So, what's a day in the life of Jack Pitts like? I mean, you wake up, and as far as work is concerned, what's it like?
Usually, at every job I've had, the morning usually will start with a daily stand-up. Yep. Every company does it a little bit different, but typically it's what did you work on yesterday, what are you working on today, and what impediments or roadblocks do you have? And that's with the whole team. So that's with all the developers, the project manager, Scrum Master, who will be sort of in charge of keeping the developers on track, any BAs or a couple other people maybe, but essentially everyone goes around and talks about those three things. And it's really just a way to check in with your team, let them know what you're working on, and if you have anything blocking your work getting done, maybe they can help or point you in a direction to help you figure out your problem. And it also lets the team know if they're on track for the current sprint or the current iteration of whatever work your team is working on, to know if it's going to get done in the time that they thought it was going to get done, or if it needs to get pushed back or what. So those are usually pretty quick meetings, maybe 15 to 30 minutes. And then after that, it's usually just working on whatever story, whatever feature you're working on, new functionality, bugs, any work, and then you have meetings scattered throughout. So some days you'll have like a refinement session, which is when your product owner or whoever's in charge of whatever you're working on will bring all of their new work that they have for you in the future, and you as a team, development team, will go through and sort of refine it, make sure it makes sense from a technical perspective, make sure it's solving the business problems that you have, and so that those can start to get scheduled down the road in the future.
Yeah.
And then you also go ahead.
Sorry, something that comes to mind that you hear a lot of people who may or may not be all that familiar was like in the old days, they'd say, give a developer a task and stick them in a closet and then, let them come out. But it doesn't sound like that to me. When you're saying, every day you've got meetings, every day at 8 o'clock you start off, in meetings, working with people, talking about software, challenges that you have. So it's not, there's a lot of people skills required is kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you have to interact with people constantly. I mean, at Daugherty, they like to say you're a consultant first. So I say I'm a software engineer, but if you ask Daugherty what I did, they would say, oh, Jack's a consultant, meaning he interacts with our clients, tries to build the business or strengthen the business ties that we have with them. You're constantly representing whatever company you're with. Some like Engage Software was they did contract work, so we did have clients. I didn't interact with them too much, but I still had to interact with all my coworkers, from just other developers to UX designers to BAs to the vice president. It's a kind of a small company, so it's not that impressive, but you have to interact with all kinds of different people. I will say there will be days where you're locked in a closet just pounding away at the keyboard. You should cherish those days. They're definitely nice to just like get stuff done and focus on your work.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, more often than not, you're going to have at least a couple of meetings every day.
How often when you're working on code? So, if I had to guess, it sounds like you're talking about maybe 6 hours, 5, 6 hours of coding a day in a typical day.
Yeah, so that's sort of what most, I think, Scrum Masters, project managers will plan for. They know that there's meetings and other things going on. Sometimes you just need to take a break, grab a cup of coffee, take a walk, something like that. So most companies expect about 6 hours a day of actually getting work done,
Gotcha.
code work done, I should say.
Gotcha. So 6 hours of code, and then the remaining 2, 3 hours are meetings, emails. How do you get like your to do list?
Um, a little some okay. So two main places. First is just from your team. Most teams are probably agile or waterfall at this point. Um, so usually you'll have a board with a list of things that need to get done for whatever iteration, whether it's a sprint or whatever
Yep.
you want to call it.
Yep.
Um, and so most of the time that work will be prioritized. So if you don't have any code work to work on, you'll go to that board and grab something, or a project manager or somebody will tell you, hey, we need you to work on this. So you'll get some of your work from other people or from your team. But then also, like you mentioned, you get a ton of emails, there's meetings. Part of it is just you having to figure out your schedule and prioritize things, figure out what's the most important for you and your team, and then make sure that stuff gets done.
Nice. Nice. What did you do that helped you get your first job? What advice would you offer to people that are like, hey, I really want to, land my first job. I'm working really hard to land my first job. What tips would you give?
Oh man. Well, my first job out of Ranken was with Engage Software. I feel I got kind of lucky with that. They were looking for some like part-time software engineers. Um, and I think maybe you had a relationship with them, and so they came to you and asked for some people. So you handed out their job posting essentially, and I applied for it. And it just sort of the interview worked out well. And so I don't. That's a tough one. Definitely do like I feel like Rankin offers it, but do some mock interviews. Um, I know when I was in class, we went over some sort of not basic, but like some standard development questions that they ask in interviews. Like, what are those? Foo something.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Continue, I'll think of it.
Yeah. So I would say definitely do some mock interviews, because every company's different how they interview. Daugherty you'll go through at least two interviews. One's a technical interview and one's more of a standard interview. I want to say Rankin offers like mock interviews that you can do that are more like standard.
Yeah,
So like
they do.
describe a time when you did this. So definitely do that just to prepare yourself to know what types of questions are coming your way. And then just also be confident. Don't be afraid to be wrong in a technical interview. Most companies are more looking to see how you think rather than does he know the answer to this problem. They want to see how you solve the problem. So even if you don't solve it, if you can show how you're thinking through the problem, how you're going about answering the question.
Fizz buzz.
FizzBuzz, there we go.
Yeah,
I don't know where
yeah.
foo came from. Yeah, so those seem to be pretty standard questions.
Well, foo bar is another common, thing that programmers use is they public class foo. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say, yeah, brush up on that, and then go to the Rankin Career Fair for sure. I know those can be super intimidating. I mentioned I had gotten a business degree, and I was always scared out of my mind to go to the career fairs at that school. But I went to the ones at Rankin, and you just get to meet a lot of different people. Whether you end up applying at that company or getting a job at that company, it's just good to know a bunch of different people. I feel like I have contacts just from going to that.
You do, and I know you do because I can think of it. I know one employer specifically that when you were either graduating or about to graduate, they were like, "Where's Jack? We want to talk to Jack." And so you made an impression on one of those employers. And so, what did you do at the job fair to have that kind of response from an employer? Because you had some success there.
Yeah, I would say so. When you go to the job fair, you don't have to worry about being the smartest or best developer or programmer. They're not going to ask you those types of questions. They might ask you, like what languages are you interested in? So it's good to know that. But really, you just have to try and be personable. Ask about the company. Definitely do research before the job fair. Maybe pick 5 to 10 companies that you know are going and do some research on them so you don't go up to them and say, "Hey, what do you guys do?" It's not the worst question, but it looks better if you can go up to them and say, "Hey, I saw you guys are working on this. Can you tell me about this application or this project that you guys are working on?" So show interest in their company. Even if you're really not interested, it's still good to show that you're interested, because a company doesn't want to hire someone that doesn't want to be there. So if it looks like you're interested, and then I just yeah, be personable. Try and be their friend. Don't try and be their best friend, but make it come off like you're somebody who they would want to work with. I know it's not always easy to do, but just be nice, ask a lot of questions, seem interested, and do some research.
Yeah, yeah, really good tips. Yeah, that's one thing that I do remember about that. About the time you were getting ready to graduate, it was Barry Waymiller. Remember them?
Yeah, I do.
Yep, yep. And they literally asked for you by name when you were graduating, and I think you might have had that internship at that point.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I find it healthy to discuss in general, salary expectations, kind of coming out of school, 3 to 5 years, where you might be in this industry. So what tips would you give around those kinds of expectations?
Man, that's a good question. I would say, again, do your research. There's a lot of like Glassdoor. I'm sure there's some other ones. I know there's some other ones. Take a look at like what the average software engineer, developer, programmer gets paid in St. Louis, both, entry level, mid level, senior, overall. So that'll give you a pretty good idea of what people are paying. I would say entry level, don't set your expectations real high. There are some companies like Daugherty is offering quite a bit of money for entry level. They'll typically have you go through they call it Daugherty University. It's like a training program. Just make sure you're sort of, you're up to snuff on the languages that they want you to know, and they are confident to put you in front of clients.
You didn't have to go through that, did you?
I don't know how that happened, but yeah, a bunch of guys, or I should say a few people from my class at Ranken ended up going through Daugherty University. I missed that because I was with Engage, and when I interviewed with Daugherty, it was sort of in between when they were doing those classes. Yeah. So instead of making me wait, they just brought me on.
Yeah, I think if you have real world experience, that's probably why you didn't have to go through that. But anyone that has not had that real world experience yet, they pretty much require you to go through that.
Yeah, and it's a good program. I mean, it's a safe space to sort of get your feet wet in a consulting role. Yeah. You won't meet with clients till you get out of the program, but you'll get some more technical training. You'll learn a bunch of different stuff. You'll learn how to be a consultant. Yeah. You'll meet a ton of people. So if you're thinking about Daugherty, look into it. What was the question?
It's salary expectations.
Oh, salary expectations. But my first job at Engage, I was paid significantly less than what I was at Daugherty. Now, they're a smaller company. So if you go to a smaller company, it might be a little bit harder for them to afford as much as what a large company like Daugherty could. So know that going into it. If you want to go work with a smaller company, that's not a bad thing. But you'll probably start out making a little bit less. But yeah, just sort of do some research, know what companies are paying in general. So sort of set your expectations, but then it's also good to know. So once you get started, there's kind of not much you can do. You can negotiate a little bit with some companies, but once you get started, continue to do that research and sort of understand your value. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, like, I think I'm worth this much and you're not paying me that much. What can we do to get up there? So definitely try to understand your value. It's not a bad thing to talk to your coworkers about what they're getting paid. You shouldn't come in on your first day and say, hey, how much are you making? But, when you get comfortable with the people you're working with, it's not a bad thing to discuss that. It's only going to help you. It'll only help them. Um, so just, yeah, try and understand what it is you're worth,
Yeah, cool.
and do some research on the market.
Cool. So I changed my last question just a little bit, and so basically the last question is, do you think this is a lifelong career, or do you see yourself at some point, maybe 5, 10, 15 years in the future, changing into something else?
Um, I think for now, my mindset is that it's a lifelong career. I enjoy writing code. Um, I like what I'm doing for the most part right now. I know some people get into it, they realize get into the industry, they realize, oh, maybe this isn't what I want to do for the rest of my life. I will say though that with this industry, if you're coming in as a developer, software engineer, programmer, whatever you want to call it, you'll quickly realize that you can stay in this industry and do a lot of different things. Most development teams need a scrum master, which is somebody who sort of guides the team, makes sure they're getting their work done, facilitates meeting with other teams if you need it, all kinds of different things. So you can take that role. You can become a project manager who works with true stakeholders in the application you're working with, whether that's a client or a different department in your company. So you sort of become the liaison between the work that needs to get done and the people who want that work done. You can become a business analyst, someone who does the research and sort of figures out what's the best way actually to get things done, and how many people are using it in this way, how many people are using it in that way. There's a ton of different roles. So even if you get into your job and you say, man, I don't know if I want to write code every day, there's a lot of different things you can do, all within your same company, all within the same industry. For now, I like what I'm doing. I don't expect myself to change roles. I think eventually, after probably a lot of years, if I get enough experience, I'd like to move to more of an architect role, which is higher level, sort of planning how things are built rather than actually building them.
Hey, so one of the questions I got today from one of my students, because you talk about software architecting and the planning that goes into software development. And so, at Ranken we use these UML diagrams. So have you used UML diagrams? Wah, wah, wah.
I won't say no. I haven't personally.
Okay.
I don't know that the architects that I've worked with have used specifically UML diagrams,
Okay.
but every company that I've worked with uses some sort of diagram or layout application tool that will show you, like, we got this. I don't know that I've seen it at like the application level, so like methods and classes interacting with each other, but you definitely see it with like, this application interacts with this one and this one and this database, and it needs to end up here. So no, I haven't used UML diagrams, but it's a good thing to like understand how to read and
Okay.
see, because yeah.
I just thought I'd throw that one in there because it was literally asked of me today, and I said, hey, I said my answer was, odds are if you work at some larger companies, they're more likely to have some diagramming tools like UML.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, so cool.
And I think
yeah.
at we met, I don't know, a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. There's a group of us, some alumni. I'm pretty sure at least one of those guys said that they use them consistently.
Okay.
So it is used in the industry.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, hey, I just want to, say thanks again for taking the time to answer some questions.
For sure.
I'll open it up to my class if you guys have any questions for Jack. Again, he's a great resource. Works for a good company and has been doing this for some years now. What kind of questions you got for Jack? Yes.
Would you recommend after Ranken, continuing your education and going to
I'll repeat the question.
university?
Okay.
Or you think Ranken is enough to get you ready for the workforce?
Would you recommend continuing your education, or was Ranken enough?
Yes. Ranking is enough to for sure get you a job. You're going to continue to learn on your job. Whatever company you go to, even if you think you're an expert in C# and they're a C# company and you are really good at C#, you still aren't going to know everything. So you'll learn on the job. Uh, I would say you should still continue your education. That's a big thing with the company I work for, with Daugherty. It was a big thing with the company I worked with before at Engage Software. Most companies will have classes that they offer, lunch and learns, after work classes. Daugherty offers a ton of different resources. So we have subscriptions to O'Reilly, which is like a virtual library for any kind of technical book you might need.
Yeah.
They usually offer subscriptions to like Pluralsight, which is a good online learning course. I mentioned that my next engagement I might be using React, so I'm teaching myself React using a Pluralsight course. So Ranken is good to get you where you want to be, but you're going to have to continue learning.
Let me ask you this question. So, you think back to school and, a lot of reading the book, right? How many times is like, read the chapter, read the chapter. How many times do I say that? I'm always saying read the chapter. How much do you find yourself reading documentation, reading versus video training? So you
Okay.
obviously have Pluralsight video training. It's like you want to learn a new skill, you could go to a video resource, or you could go to documentation in like a textbook sort of style.
So I have not really done any like reading textbooks. I probably should, because as much as it was a pain when I was at Ranken to read, 50 pages a night or whatever it was, um, the problems that they had in those books and how you could go kind of flip back and figure it out on your own was nice. A lot of the online training courses, they're good and you'll definitely learn a lot, but a lot of them are like people taking you through their code. So you got to hit pause, go to your IDE, replicate the stuff. I've done video learning just because it's a little bit easier to do
Sure.
than reading through a book, but I feel like most of the people at Daugherty prefer reading through a book like O'Reilly.
Interesting.
And I know there's benefit there. I know I should probably read more, but
That's an interesting answer. Cool. Thanks for that. Yeah, right.
So like every day, like while he's working and he's coding, is how many times does he like go to somebody else for a problem that he can help with? Or is it like
How many times in a day will you go to someone else for help?
so, all right. So most days I run into something that I don't know how to fix, or at least we'll say most weeks. Most weeks I'll run into something that I don't know what to do. So thinking of like the work I'm currently doing, test automation, I've been doing it for over a year and a half, so I'm pretty confident in my abilities at this point. But I run into things I don't know how to solve. Your first step when you don't know how to solve something shouldn't necessarily be to go to somebody else for the answer. You should spend some time doing research. Like I said earlier, Google's your friend. Stack Overflow is a really good website. Most of the time, you'll find an answer there. But try and do some research on your own first, and then go to somebody for an answer. To answer your question specifically, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a week, I have to reach out because I get stuck and I can't find the answer online, and I know there's somebody who would know the answer. Now, I will say that it's sort of a fine line you got to walk. You don't want to waste a whole day just trying to find an answer, especially if there's someone who does know it. So I say typically if you run into a problem, you don't know how to solve it, spend an hour, maybe 2 hours doing some research on your own, trying to figure it out. You'll learn a lot more that way. You'll learn things you weren't looking for. But then, go to somebody. Don't be afraid. Like I mentioned before, most people in this industry are excited to help people. There'll always be someone there to help you. And if there isn't, I don't know what to tell you. I haven't had that happen yet. I wasn't going to say go find a new job, but every company you work for, there'll be somebody there who's happy to help you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer. Step one, try your best to solve it yourself.
Yeah.
Give it some sort of timer, be it 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours.
Yeah.
Put some sort of like, I'm gonna try and solve this myself, and if I'm spinning my wheels after 2 hours, then I'll go ask.
Yeah. And I will say, at my first job, I always got nervous that like it was going to look bad if I was constantly asking for help. And I expressed those concerns to some of my bosses and some of my tech leads, and they're like, stop it. Like, don't, like, we know you don't know everything. We know you're going to have questions. Ask them if you can't solve the problem yourself. So don't be afraid to ask either.
Yep, good question, good answer. Anybody else before we get off the line with Jack? Hey man, thanks again. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.